Chapter 1. The Snowstorm. The wind howled through the desolate forests, lashing against the car windows as if trying to tear apart the serene silence of the Scottish landscape. The thick darkness of the night enveloped everything, with only the car's headlights cutting faint streaks of light through the raging snowstorm. Ellie Carter, gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles turning white from the cold and tension. The car trembled each time a gust of wind struck, but she kept driving, her focus locked on the winding road ahead. This wasn't the first time she had faced such harsh weather, but tonight's storm was exceptionally brutal. She had just finished a grueling 14-hour shift at Loch Lomond Regional Hospital, a small medical facility, yet the only one within miles capable of handling emergencies. The work was already exhausting, but this winter had made everything even more overwhelming. The number of patients had surged, with many suffering from hypothermia or injuries caused by the treacherous, icy roads. Ellie loved her job, but nights like these made her wonder if she was pushing herself too far. She couldn't even remember the last time she had a full night's sleep. Sometimes memories from the past crept in, her impoverished childhood, the grandmother who raised her with stories of kindness and resilience, and the years of relentless struggle to earn her place in the medical field. She sighed, reminding herself that she was only 15 minutes away from home. A hot cup of tea, a warm blanket, and a short rest before diving back into work. But just then, in the snow-covered darkness, something suddenly appeared in her line of sight. Chapter 2. The Stranger in the Storm. Up ahead, near a sharp curve, Ellie's headlights reflected off something unusual. A black SUV lay tilted in a snow-filled ditch on the side of the road. Its windows shattered, the hood crumpled beyond recognition. Ellie's heart pounded. A crash? Without a second thought, she pulled over, grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment, and rushed out, ignoring the icy wind that slashed against her skin like frozen blades. Her boots crunched against the snow as she approached. In the dim glow of her headlights, she saw that the front door of the SUV was flung open. The windshield cracked, and dark red blood smeared across the pristine white snow. Ellie crouched down, shining her flashlight into the car. A man lay motionless in the driver's seat, his head slumped to the side. Blood trickled from a wound on his forehead, dripping onto his thick black coat. "Oh, God!" Ellie gasped, quickly reaching for the car door. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck, feeling for a pulse. Weak, but still there. "Can you hear me?" She shook his shoulder gently, but he didn't respond. The storm raged on, sending a violent gust of wind through the trees, making Ellie shiver. She knew she couldn't leave him here. Hypothermia would set in quickly, and in this weather, calling for emergency services was futile. Clenching her jaw, she made a decision. She had to get him out. He was taller than she expected, and pulling an unconscious man from a wrecked car in the middle of a blizzard was no easy task. But with every ounce of strength she had left, she finally managed to haul him out and drag him toward her own vehicle. As she laid him down in the back seat, Ellie took a moment to study him more closely. There was something about him, his chiseled features, the expensive but torn clothing, the blood-stained luxury watch on his wrist. Everything about him radiated power. "Who are you?" Ellie murmured, but the man remained silent. Closing the car door, she hurried back to the driver's seat, stepped on the gas, and sped off into the snowstorm with the mysterious stranger in tow. Chapter 3. The First Signs of Mystery. Outside, the snowstorm had yet to subside. The wind battered against the wooden windows, creating long, eerie whistles. Ellie sat in an old armchair, the flickering firelight casting shadows across her face and stretching her silhouette across the floor. Her gaze drifted toward the unconscious man lying on the couch near the fireplace. He didn't look like an ordinary person. Even in his unconscious state, there was an inexplicable aura of authority about him. His thick coat was still dusted with snow, torn from the accident, with dried blood staining the fabric. Ellie took a deep breath. She had no intention of rummaging through a stranger's belongings, but her instincts as a medical professional told her she needed to find something. An ID, a phone, anything that could help identify him. Gingerly, she reached into his coat pocket, her fingers brushing against a small metallic object. A USB drive. Ellie frowned. A man crashes in the middle of the night on a deserted road, carrying no identification or phone, but he has a USB hidden in his pocket? She picked it up, turning it over in her palm. This wasn't an ordinary USB drive. It was silver with sharp edges and a small engraved insignia on the back. WTS. Ellie murmured, WTS. What does that mean? Glancing back at the unconscious man, she made a decision. She had to check what was inside. Ellie powered up her old laptop, the screen flickering as the system booted. She plugged in the USB, her fingers trembling slightly with anticipation. A folder appeared on the screen. Inside was a single file, its name a cryptic string of characters. Encrypted file 897x01.wts. Ellie tried to open it, but a password prompt immediately popped up. She hit enter, but nothing happened. She tried guessing simple passwords like 123456, but each attempt was rejected. Damn it, she muttered. She wasn't a tech expert, but she knew an ordinary person wouldn't have a heavily encrypted file like this tucked away in their coat pocket. She turned back to look at the man on the couch. Who was he? As Ellie pondered, the small radio in the kitchen crackled to life, followed by the announcer's voice. Morning news from BBC Scotland. The snowstorm continues to wreak havoc across the Highlands, with multiple roads blocked. Authorities advise residents to stay indoors. Ellie stepped closer, adjusting the volume. In other news, London police continue their investigation into the disappearance of Whitmore Industries' CEO, Sebastian Whitmore, who vanished 2 days ago under mysterious circumstances. Sources indicate that Mr. Whitmore may have left the city under dangerous conditions, but no trace of him has been found so far. Ellie froze, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She snapped her gaze toward the man on the couch, her eyes locking onto his face. Sebastian Whitmore. That name sounded familiar. She had read about him in the news. Whitmore Industries was one of Europe's largest finance and logistics corporations. If she remembered correctly, Sebastian's father had recently passed away, and he had just taken over the company. Her eyes darted back to the USB on the table. USB with WTS engraved. Whitmore Technology Solutions. The puzzle pieces clicked together. The man she had rescued wasn't just some businessman. He was a CEO, a man being hunted. A chill ran down Ellie's spine. She took a step back, realizing she had been pulled into something far bigger than she had imagined. But just then, a weak groan came from the couch. Sebastian stirred, his eyes fluttering open as he struggled to focus. Ellie stepped closer, but before she could say a word, his hand shot out, gripping her wrist. His eyes, filled with panic, locked onto hers. Don't tell anyone I'm here." His voice was weak but urgent. Ellie froze. "Why not?" she asked. Sebastian frowned as if trying to piece his memories together. The pain from his injuries clouded his mind, but after a moment, his voice came again, low but sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Because they will kill you if they find out you helped me." Ellie stood still. She knew from this moment on there was no turning back. Chapter 5. The Mystery of the Man on the News. Sebastian Seb. Whitmore woke with a sharp pain throbbing in his temple. The world around him was hazy, wrapped in an unfamiliar warmth. The scent of burning wood lingered in the air, mixed with the faint aroma of tea. He blinked, trying to focus. A small cabin, a fireplace crackling in the corner, and a woman sitting nearby, reading a newspaper. When Ellie noticed he was awake, she set the paper down. "Are you all right?" Her voice was calm but cautious. Seb frowned. Where am I?" "My house. I found you in a wreck on the road. Do you remember what happened?" Seb tried to recall, but nothing. He remembered driving, headlights in the rearview mirror, gunshots, or was that just his imagination? He shook his head, panic creeping into his chest. "I don't remember." Ellie studied him carefully, as if deciding whether to believe him. "Do you know your name?" Seb closed his eyes, searching his mind. "Sebastian. I think so." Ellie gave a small nod, but in her eyes the suspicions she had the night before were now confirmed. He was the missing CEO of Whitmore Industries. She stood, picked up the newspaper, and handed it to him. Seb took it, his eyes landing on a front-page article. CEO of Whitmore Industries disappears amid allegations of money laundering and arms smuggling. Beneath the headline was a picture of himself. His world tilted. What the hell was happening? Welcome to Soul Stories. When you hear these words, you are now a cherished part of the Soul Stories family, a place where we share heartfelt tales that touch the soul. We deeply appreciate every follow, every encouraging comment, and all the feedback you provide. It is your support that drives us to improve continuously, bringing you stories that are profound, meaningful, and resonate with emotions. Each story is not just a collection of words. It's a small gift meant to bring a little joy and sentiment amidst the chaos of life. We may not always be able to satisfy everyone, but please share your thoughts and wishes with us so we can create even more complete stories and spread happiness to more people. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story. Let's spread love together. Invite your family and friends to join so our community can soon reach 10,000 members. Soul Stories, stories that touch the soul. Chapter 6. The Hunters Appear, a village on the brink. Morning in the village of Loch Lomond was serene, with thick snow blanketing the cobblestone streets, transforming everything into a picturesque winter scene. But that peace was about to be shattered. Inside the Highlander, the only pub in the village, warmth radiated from the crackling fireplace, mingling with the rich aroma of burning wood and whiskey. Locals gathered around the bar, exchanging gossip about last night's storm and the roads blocked by snow. Suddenly, the wooden door swung open, silencing the chatter as two unfamiliar men stepped inside. The first was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a thick beard, clad in a black leather coat. His sharp gaze scanned the room like a predator sizing up its prey. The second man, with neatly combed dark hair and a scar running down his chin, wore a gray turtleneck sweater. He appeared more refined, but there was a cold, calculating sharpness in his eyes. The bearded man strode to the bar, leaning his elbows on the polished wooden counter. "We're looking for someone," he said, his voice rough, laced with the scent of tobacco. The bartender, McGregor, narrowed his eyes at the strangers. "Not many outsiders pass through this village." The dark-haired man reached into his pocket, pulling out a small photograph. He placed it on the counter. Sebastian Whitmore. McGregor glanced at the photo, his expression carefully neutral. "What's he done for you to be looking for him?" "He's missing," the bearded man smirked. "We're friends. Just want to make sure he's safe." McGregor wasn't a fool. These men weren't anyone's friends. "Haven't seen him," he said firmly, holding their gaze without flinching. The dark-haired man offered a small, knowing smile. "We'll check for ourselves." Without another word, they turned and walked out. McGregor watched from the window as they climbed into a black SUV parked outside. The vehicle crept slowly through the village, its occupants peering at each house, searching. They were hunting, Ellie's growing fear. Ellie had left early that morning to pick up medicine and supplies from the village's small store. On her way back, she stopped by the Highlander to chat with McGregor. He pulled her aside, his voice low. "Have you noticed anything unusual?" Ellie frowned. "Unusual? How?" McGregor gestured toward the village road. "Two strangers asking about an injured man? Showed me this picture." He handed her the photograph. Ellie nearly dropped it. "Seb." Forcing herself to remain calm, she asked, "What did you tell them?" McGregor crossed his arms. "Lied, of course, but they're not the type to be easily fooled." A cold chill ran down Ellie's spine, and it wasn't from the snow. "I have to go," she said quickly, hurrying toward home. A black SUV. As she approached her cottage, Ellie froze. A black SUV sat across the street, near the entrance to the forest. Its tinted windows reflected the stark white snow, but she could feel unseen eyes watching her. She swallowed hard, forcing herself not to panic. Keeping her pace steady, she reached her door, slipped inside, and locked it, twice. Seb was in the kitchen, pouring water into a glass. He looked up as she entered. "What's wrong?" Ellie rushed to the window, peeking outside. The SUV was still there. "They found you!" Seb set the glass down, his expression darkening. Where? Not far, but I think they saw me come in. Seb cursed under his breath, his hands clenching into fists. Memories of the night he was chased came flooding back. David Langston, the CFO of Whitmore Industries, the man who had ordered his execution. When Seb had refused to participate in money laundering and arms trafficking, David and the board of directors had decided to eliminate him. Anna Catter, the only person who had helped him gather evidence, had been killed, and now they were still hunting him. Seb turned to Ellie, his voice edged with urgency. We have to leave. Now you need to come with me. It's not safe for you here anymore. A desperate escape. Ellie didn't hesitate. Staying meant death. She rushed to her bedroom, grabbing a small backpack and stuffing it with a personal medical kit, some dry food, cash and a bank card, a small knife hidden in her drawer. Seb moved quickly as well, retrieving the USB and tucking it into his coat. Do you have a car? He asked. Yes, but they might be watching it. Seb frowned. Then we can't use it. Ellie's mind raced before she remembered something. There's a forest trail that leads to a friend's house. If we can reach it, I can borrow his car. Seb nodded. Let's go. Into the snowy forest, they slipped out through the back door, moving along the narrow path behind the house. The wind howled through the trees, but the darkness worked in their favor. Seb cast a glance back. The SUV remained parked, unmoving, but he knew they were waiting. They trudged through the snow-covered forest, their footsteps sinking deep. Ellie struggled to keep her breathing steady, her nerves stretched taut. Then suddenly, the distant growl of an engine echoed through the trees. Seb yanked her to the side, pulling her behind a thick tree trunk. The SUV was moving. They held their breath. Headlights swept across the forest, illuminating the snow in sharp streaks of white. Seb tightened his grip on Ellie's wrist, whispering into her ear, "Don't move. We can't let them find us." Ellie's heart pounded so loudly she feared they would hear it. They had only one chance to escape. If they were caught, there would be no going back. The chase had only just begun. Chapter 7. Seeking Help. Snow continued to fall heavily as Ellie drove out of the village, her old SUV turning onto the main road leading toward Edinburgh. They had made it out of the forest safely, but the tension inside the car lingered. Seb sat in the passenger seat, his gaze fixed outside the window. Though the sky was still dark, the distant glow of small towns along the road began to appear. Edinburgh was still far away, but every passing minute felt like a race against death. Ellie glanced at him, her voice low. "Are you sure Clara Clark can help us?" Seb nodded firmly. "If anyone can expose the truth, it's her." Clara Clark wasn't just any journalist. She was one of the most experienced investigative reporters in the UK, known for uncovering major political and financial scandals. She was one of the few people Seb could trust. But even if they found her, would they get there in time before their pursuers caught up? 3 hours later, they arrived in Edinburgh. The city was still quiet in the early morning. Ellie drove into a narrow alley, parking behind an old cafe. Seb kept his head down as he stepped out, pulling his coat hood over his face. They walked through the deserted street until they reached a gray stone building with a sign that read, "The Sentinel, Independent Press." Ellie glanced around nervously. "Are you sure she's here?" Seb nodded and pressed the doorbell. Seconds later, the door swung open, revealing a middle-aged woman with deep auburn hair. Her sharp eyes scanned them before landing on Seb. "Sebastian Whitmore," she said, her voice both quiet and striking. "I thought you were dead." Seb smirked. "Not yet, but I came close." Clara's gaze flickered to Ellie before she stepped aside. "Get in, quickly." Inside, they sat in a small office cluttered with documents and thick stacks of printed reports. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the space as a battered coffee machine dripped into a cup. Clara inserted Seb's USB into her laptop, her curiosity evident. "Are you sure this contains enough evidence to expose Whitmore Industries?" Seb nodded. "If we can decrypt it, it'll change everything." Clara typed rapidly, opening the folder containing the encrypted file. She launched a powerful decryption program, watching as lines of complex code scrolled across the screen. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. Then suddenly a list of data appeared. Clara frowned, scrolling through the files. Then her expression darkened. "Oh my God!" Ellie leaned forward. "What's in it?" Clara turned to Seb, her voice slow but heavy with tension. "Did you know that your company isn't just laundering money, but also involved in arms smuggling?" Seb's brows furrowed. "I knew they were funneling money through shell companies, but arms smuggling?" Clara's fingers flew over the keyboard, opening a PDF filled with classified contracts, secret deals between Whitmore Industries and several front companies operating in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. "This isn't just laundering," Clara said. "Your company has been selling weapons to terrorist organizations. Whitmore Industries is buried under layers of dummy corporations, but the trail is still there. And here," she scrolled down to a highlighted red line in a classified document. "Termination plan for high-risk individuals." Below it was a list of names. Seb's name was at the top. Ellie's stomach twisted as she read the words. Seb let out a bitter chuckle, devoid of humor. "So they had this planned all along." Clara met his gaze, serious. "They don't just want you dead. They want you erased. Permanently." Ellie's throat went dry. She turned to Seb. "We need to get this out to the world, right now." Clara sat up straight and nodded. "I'll send this to the major news outlets, but we need to act fast. Once this leaks, they'll have no way to cover it up." Seb inhaled deeply. "Do it. Now." Just as Clara started uploading the data, a flashing red warning popped up on the screen. "Warning. File under surveillance. Unauthorized access detected." Clara's eyes widened, her face draining of color. "They know." Seb shot up. "They're tracking the USB?" Clara nodded, her voice urgent. "And now they know exactly where we are." Ellie's breath caught. She turned to Seb. "We have to leave. Now!" Clara hurriedly copied all the data onto another USB and slipped it into her pocket. "I have a safe house in the south of the city," she said. "We can regroup there." Seb nodded, but before they could move, a loud crash echoed from outside. Bang! Ellie flinched as she saw a group of men in black storming into the press office. "Police?" she whispered. Clara narrowed her eyes, her expression turning ice cold. These are David Langston's men." Seb clenched his fists. "Damn it. They got here faster than I thought." Clara swiftly shut down her computer, yanking out the USB. "We have to go. If they catch us, we won't get another chance." Seb grabbed Ellie's hand, pulling her toward the back exit. Their escape wasn't over. It had only just begun. Are you still following the story? Leave a comment about what you think will happen next and share your thoughts. Chapter 8. A Calm Night Amidst the Storm. Clara Clark's small apartment was nestled in a quiet neighborhood in southern Edinburgh, hidden within an alley near the riverbank. It wasn't luxurious, but it was safe and discreet, a perfect place to lay low while they figured out their next move. As soon as they arrived, Clara wasted no time. She booted up her computer, activating her secure system to download and analyze the files from Seb's USB. The cold blue light from the screen illuminated her focused expression. "This will take some time to process," Clara said, eyes fixed on the screen. "You two should rest, but keep your phones off and don't let any light escape the windows." Ellie nodded. She reached for Seb's hand, silently signaling for him to follow her onto the small balcony at the back of the apartment. Seb glanced down at their hands for a moment, his fingers unconsciously tightening around hers. It was time to tell her everything. Taking a deep breath, he gazed out at the Edinburgh skyline, the city lights flickering in the distance. "My father died 6 months ago," he began, his voice low and heavy. "He founded and ran Whitmore Industries, one of the leading finance and logistics conglomerates in Europe. My whole life I believed our company was a symbol of success, but I was wrong." Ellie listened silently, sensing the weight behind his words. "When he passed, I inherited his position as CEO. The board of directors, men who had worked alongside my father for decades, told me I just needed to keep things running and follow the path he had set." Seb let out a bitter chuckle. "But I couldn't do that once I realized something was very, very wrong." Ellie frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Seb exhaled sharply. At first, I noticed some irregularities in our financial system. Massive transactions flowing between subsidiaries with no clear explanation of where the money was coming from or where it was going. I dug deeper, and what I found changed everything. He paused, his jaw tightening. Whitmore Industries isn't just a finance and logistics company. It's a massive money laundering machine, part of an international network funding arms, smuggling and economic manipulation. They don't just hide dirty money, they sell security technology to governments and criminal organizations, helping them cover up their activities. A shiver ran down Ellie's spine. She had never imagined that a legitimate corporation could be involved in such deep-rooted corruption. Seb shook his head, his expression darkening. I thought I could reform the company. I tried bringing my concerns to the board, but he trailed off, his voice turning colder. They had no intention of changing. They had been running this system for decades. And to them, I was just a naive fool who still believed in justice. Ellie swallowed. What did they do? Seb met her eyes. At first, they tried to persuade me, told me this was just part of international business, that my father had done the same, that I couldn't change the way things worked. His eyes narrowed as if he could still hear David Langston's voice, the CFO's smooth, calculating tone playing in his mind. Sebastian, don't be foolish. You're a Whitmore. Let us handle things, just as your father did. But Seb had refused to comply. He clenched his fist. I told them I was going to expose everything, and that's when things turned ugly. Ellie held her breath. Seb's voice dropped lower. They started threatening me. My closest advisors were suddenly fired. My emails and calls were monitored. I started receiving warnings, subtle ones like, think carefully before you act. He paused for a moment before inhaling deeply. But I didn't back down. I reached out to Anna Catter, my father's former senior assistant. She had been suspicious for years, and when I told her my plan, she agreed to help. Ellie could see the pain in his eyes as he continued. Anna found the key evidence, the list of laundered transactions, the illegal arms contracts, and most importantly, the names behind it all. He glanced down, touching the USB in his coat pocket. We backed up the data, and Anna told me I needed to leave London immediately. She would help me connect with a trusted investigative journalist. Ellie squeezed his hand. Clara. Seb nodded. But I didn't get the chance. A friend's betrayal. Seb took a deep breath. A day after we made our plan, Anna was killed. The police ruled it as suicide, but I know the truth. He turned to Ellie, his eyes burning with restrained fury. They murdered her, and I was next. His fingers curled into fists. That night, I took the USB and tried to get to Edinburgh to meet Clara. But as soon as I got in my car, I realized I was being followed. I tried to shake them off, but Ellie's stomach twisted. You were forced off the road. Seb nodded. I don't know if they think I'm dead, but one thing is certain. He exhaled sharply. They want to erase me completely. A dry, bitter laugh escaped his lips. And that's why the media is reporting me as missing. They're controlling the story, setting up whatever accident they plan to stage next. Ellie felt her heart tighten. She looked at the man standing before her. A man who once had everything, wealth, power, influence. But instead of looking the other way like so many others, he had chosen to fight against a corrupt system. And the price he paid was being hunted down like an animal. Are you scared? She whispered. Seb hesitated, then let out a small, self-deprecating chuckle. Of course. He turned to face her fully, his voice quieter but resolute. But fear doesn't matter when there's something more important at stake. Ellie studied him, waiting. Seb stepped closer, his voice firm. I have a reason to keep fighting, and now, I'm not fighting alone. Ellie held his gaze. Seb leaned on the railing, inhaling the cold night air, as if savoring this brief moment of peace. Ellie stood beside him, staring at the city beyond. Did you ever imagine your life turning out like this? She asked softly. Seb let out a quiet laugh, tinged with bitterness. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have said my future was boardrooms, billion-dollar contracts, and endless flights across the world. He exhaled, shaking his head. But now, I'm a fugitive in the Scottish winter with nothing but a USB to prove I ever existed. Ellie gave him a small smile. Do you regret it? Seb turned to her, his gray-blue eyes reflecting the moonlight. No, he said without hesitation. I couldn't turn a blind eye, knowing my company was destroying lives. I grew up believing Whitmore Industries was a symbol of success, but it was just a mask covering something rotten underneath. He looked down at his hands that once signed multi-million-dollar deals, now bruised and worn from days on the run. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing the right thing. Ellie watched him in silence. She saw a man who had been betrayed by his own empire, yet refused to surrender. She leaned on the railing, smiling softly. You know, I also thought my life would turn out differently. Seb turned toward her. Tell me. Ellie closed her eyes for a moment, lost in memory. I grew up in a small town. My mother was a nurse, and my father died when I was young. I watched my mother work tirelessly to take care of me. She paused before smiling. I always wanted to be a doctor, but not in a fancy hospital. I wanted to help people who had no other options, the ones who couldn't afford medical care. Seb's admiration deepened. And you did it. Not enough, Ellie said. I still feel like I haven't helped enough people. Seb smirked. Then if I survive this, I'll help you build that clinic. Ellie raised a brow. Sebastian Whitmore, a billionaire CEO, helping set up a free clinic in Scotland? Seb grinned. After losing everything, I realized money isn't the most important thing. He met her eyes, his voice softer. But you are. Ellie's breath caught, and in that frozen Scottish winter, amidst all the chaos, they found warmth in each other. Chapter 9. The Missing Piece. The small apartment in southern Edinburgh remained heavy with tension. Clara sat at her computer, eyes locked on the screen as streams of decrypted data from the USB continued to unfold. Beside her, Seb stood with his arms crossed, his face impassive, but his sharp gaze calculating every detail. The files in here are almost enough to bring down Whitmore Industries, Clara said, typing rapidly. Hidden bank accounts, money laundering transactions, contracts with criminal organizations. It's all here. Ellie leaned forward slightly. So it's enough to take them to court? Clara frowned, then shook her head. Not quite. Seb clenched his fists. Why not? Clara turned the screen toward them, pointing to a locked section of the data. This only contains completed transactions, money that has already been laundered and moved. But to make sure this case holds up in court, without Whitmore Industries' lawyers tearing it apart, we need real-time evidence from their servers. We need to capture their current transactions, the ones that are still in progress. Seb fell silent, understanding exactly what she meant. No more running. Seb took a deep breath. He had been on the run long enough. If that's what we need, he said slowly, I'll get it. Ellie snapped her head toward him, eyes wide with disbelief. You can't be serious. Seb turned to face her. Ellie, without this data, they could bury the case before it ever reaches trial. The board has enough power to silence the police, manipulate the media, and erase everything we found. We need undeniable proof. Then let the FBI handle it, Ellie argued. We already have their help. There's no time, Clara interjected, her tone grim. By the time law enforcement secures a warrant, all of that data will be wiped clean. Seb nodded. That's why I have to go back. Ellie shot to her feet, stepping in front of him. You do realize this is suicide, right? They're still trying to kill you. If you walk in there... Seb gently touched her hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Ellie, he said softly but firmly, I know the risks, but if I don't do this, I'll never forgive myself. Ellie stared at him, her eyes filled with emotions she couldn't voice. She didn't want to lose him. Then I'm going with you. Seb's brows furrowed. No. There's no way I'm letting you go in alone. She cut him off. If you go, I go. Clara smirked, shaking her head. You two are absolutely insane. Seb gazed at Ellie for a long moment, then exhaled in defeat. Fine. Ellie nodded, but the worry in her eyes remained. Seb turned back to Clara. We need a plan. Breaking into Whitmore Industries, Clara pulled up a detailed floor plan of Whitmore Industries headquarters on her screen. The server room is on the 45th floor, right next to the CEO's office. This is where real-time backups of every ongoing transaction are stored. If we can get that data, no one can deny the truth anymore. Seb nodded. Security? Top tier, Clara admitted. But lucky for you, you're still technically the CEO. Your keycard should still work, unless they've deactivated it already. Ellie narrowed her eyes. And if they have, Clara smirked, then I hope you too can run fast. Seb chuckled lightly, but deep down, he knew this was a near impossible mission. But he had no choice. Back to London. 2 hours later, they arrived in London. Seb and Ellie sat in a parked car, 2 blocks away from Whitmore Industries headquarters. The building stood tall and imposing, its glass facade gleaming under the city lights, a symbol of power, wealth, and corruption. Seb exhaled, glancing at Ellie. Ready? Ellie took a deep breath, then nodded. Do you think they'll welcome you back? Seb smirked. Oh, absolutely, with a bullet. They shared a knowing look, one that acknowledged the danger, the risks, and the unspoken fears. Then together, they stepped out of the car. They were walking straight into the final battle. Chapter 10, The Final Confrontation. Night had fallen over London, casting the towering skyscrapers in deep shadows. From the rooftop of a nearby building, Seb and Ellie looked down at Whitmore Industries headquarters, a gleaming glass monument to power and success. But to Seb, it was no longer a symbol of achievement. It was the heart of corruption, the place that had destroyed lives and buried secrets in the dark. Seb turned to Ellie. You can still walk away. This is your last chance to turn back. Ellie crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow. So, what's your plan? Sneak in alone, take on an entire corporate crime syndicate, and then escape like some kind of action hero? Seb sighed, but despite himself, a small smile played on his lips. I can't change your mind, can I? Ellie smirked. No. Seb squeezed her hand gently, then inhaled deeply. Then let's do this. Infiltrating the tower. They bypassed security through an underground entrance, slipping into the dark corridors leading toward the server room. Seb quickly accessed the central system, his fingers flying over the keyboard. He searched for the final piece of evidence, a coded transaction log containing real-time proof of Whitmore Industries' illegal operations. If he could download it, the board wouldn't be able to deny anything. 10 minutes, 9 minutes, 8 minutes. But then, the door slammed open. Seb spun around, and there he was, David Langston. The man stood with a smug smirk, hands clasped behind his back, radiating arrogance. Sebastian, David mused, his voice smooth, taunting. I expected better from you. Seb clenched his fists. You betrayed my family, betrayed this company. Did you really think I'd let you get away with it? David chuckled, stepping forward. Oh, Sebastian, you're as naive as your father was. He too thought he could control this game. But in the end, he realized there are rules to this world, rules that can't be changed. Seb froze. My father knew about this? David's smirk widened. He didn't just know. He was part of it. Seb's breath caught. Number that couldn't be true. He wasn't like that, Seb growled. David scoffed. Oh, really? Then tell me, Sebastian, why do you think he died so suddenly? Seb's pulse stopped for a second. He stared at David, his voice dropping into a deadly whisper. You killed my father? David didn't answer. He didn't have to. The sinister glint in his eyes told Seb everything he needed to know. Seb felt rage like he had never known before, burning through his veins. But before he could react, Ellie grabbed his wrist, pulling him back. Don't let him control you, she whispered. Seb exhaled sharply, steadying himself. This is over, David. The police are already on their way. Everything you've done is about to be exposed. David shook his head, then reached into his coat, pulling out a gun. No, Sebastian, you're not leaving this building alive. The shot that changed everything. Time slowed. David's finger tightened on the trigger. Seb braced for impact. Bang! The gunshot echoed through the server room. But Seb felt nothing. Instead, he heard a sharp, pained gasp beside him. His world shattered. He turned and saw Ellie collapse into his arms. "Ellie!" Seb's scream was raw, desperate. Her blood stained his hands, spreading across her white shirt like a crimson bloom. She gasped, her breath shaky, shallow. Seb's mind went blank, then filled with pure, uncontainable rage. He lifted his head, his expression deadly cold. "David!" Seb's voice was a whisper of death. For the first time, David took a step back. But Seb was already moving. Seb's wrath. Seb slammed into David, knocking the gun from his hand. Then he punched him, hard. David staggered, blood spurting from his nose. But Seb didn't stop. He had been running for too long. Too many people had been hurt, and now they had shot Ellie. Seb punched him again and again, each hit fueled by months of anger, grief, and betrayal. David groaned, struggling, but Seb grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the server racks. But before Seb could land the final blow, the room filled with flashing lights and shouting voices. "Freeze, FBI!" Seb froze, chest heaving, blood dripping from his knuckles. David tried to crawl away, but a pair of cold handcuffs snapped around his wrists. A federal agent leaned down, whispering in his ear, "You're done, Langston." Seb didn't care. He only cared about Ellie, holding on to life. Seb dropped to his knees, pulling Ellie against him. She was still breathing, but barely. "Stay with me," Seb whispered, voice cracking. "Ellie, stay with me." She smiled weakly, her fingers gripping his shirt. "You're safe," she murmured. "That's all I wanted." Seb gritted his teeth, feeling tears burn his eyes. "Don't you dare say goodbye," he growled. "You're not leaving me. I won't let you." Ellie tried to smile, but her eyelids fluttered closed. "Ellie!" Paramedics rushed in, pulling Seb away as they worked to save her. Seb could only watch, helpless, as they fought to keep the woman he loved alive. Meanwhile, across the room, Clara stood among the FBI agents, her phone open. News about Whitmore Industries had already flooded the media. She met Seb's eyes, nodding. "We did it." But Seb didn't care about victory, because Ellie's life was the only battle he still had to fight. He leaned over her, pressing his forehead against hers, whispering one last promise. "Hold on, Ellie, please. Hold on." And as sirens wailed in the night, he prayed he wouldn't lose the only thing that truly mattered. Chapter 12. The End and a New Beginning. The hospital room was bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun. The steady beeping of the heart monitor filled the air, a quiet reminder that life still persisted. Ellie lay still on the hospital bed, her breathing steady but weak. The bullet wound had been treated, the surgery had gone well, but she had lost too much blood. Her body was healing, but slowly. Seb sat beside her, his hand tightly holding hers. He had been there every single day. From the moment she was rushed into emergency surgery to the long hours she spent in intensive care, he never left her side. The first few days he had feared the worst. He had already lost everything, his family, his reputation, his career. But the thought of losing Ellie, that was something he couldn't survive. Every night he whispered to her, "Wake up, Ellie. You saved me. Now it's my turn to wait for you." The nurses had tried to convince him to rest, but he refused. Then one morning, as the first light of dawn streamed through the window, her fingers moved. Seb's breath caught. He sat up straight, staring at her, his heart pounding. Ellie's eyelashes fluttered. Her eyes, those deep brown eyes, slowly opened, unfocused at first, then locked onto his face. "Seb!" Her voice was weak, but it was enough to break him completely. Seb gripped her hand tightly, as if afraid she would slip away again. The weight in his chest, the crushing fear that had suffocated him for days, finally lifted. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm always here." A single tear slipped down his cheek, but this time it was a tear of hope. Ellie had come back. Justice and redemption. As Ellie recovered, the scandal surrounding Whitmore Industries exploded worldwide. Clara had leaked every piece of evidence to major news outlets. The FBI and Interpol launched full-scale investigations. David Langston, along with the corrupt board members, was arrested on multiple charges: money laundering, arms smuggling, and conspiracy to murder the sitting CEO. Their hidden offshore accounts were frozen, the criminal network they funded was dismantled, and Whitmore Industries, it was torn down to its foundations and rebuilt, no longer a money laundering machine, but a legitimate business once more. On the day David was sentenced, Seb was in the courtroom. The man who had tried to destroy him, who had killed his father, glared at him with pure hatred. But Seb no longer cared. He had won. Not just against Whitmore Industries, but against the darkest parts of himself. He had found something far more valuable than revenge. He had found his purpose, a new path. Months later, when Ellie had fully recovered, Seb made the most important decision of his life. He walked away from Whitmore Industries. He sold every single share he owned, transferring his fortune into a charity fund, one dedicated to building a medical center in Scotland, providing free healthcare to rural communities. When he told Ellie about his plan, she stared at him, eyes filled with admiration. "You're really doing this?" she asked softly. Seb nodded. "For the first time in my life, I know what success really means. It's not about power. It's not about money. It's about helping people who need it." Then he reached for her hand, his voice gentler. "I want you to run the center. This was always your dream, wasn't it?" Ellie's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She didn't hesitate. "I will," she said, "but only if you run it with me." Seb smiled. "Always." And so together they built something new. A year ago, they were two strangers running for their lives, lost in a snowstorm. Now, they stood side by side, no longer running, no longer afraid. They had found each other, and more importantly, they had found something worth living for. 1 year later, snow blanketed Loch Lomond, covering the wooden pier in a crisp layer of white. Ellie stood at the very edge, looking over the frozen lake. She didn't know why Seb had asked her to come here tonight, but something told her this moment was special. Then, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Seb approaching, wrapped in a long coat, his gray-blue eyes glowing under the streetlights. "Do you remember this place?" he asked, a playful smirk on his lips. Ellie chuckled. "Of course. This is where I found you, and thought you had amnesia." Seb laughed. "And it's also where you saved my life." He took another step closer, then suddenly dropped to one knee. Ellie's breath caught. "Seb!" Seb pulled out a small velvet box, flipping it open. A platinum ring glimmered inside, catching the soft glow of the street lamp. "Ellie Carter," he said, his voice deep, steady. "That night in the storm changed my life forever. But the greatest thing it ever gave me was you." Ellie's heart pounded. "I can't imagine a single day without you," he continued. "I don't need power. I don't need money. The only thing I want is to share this life with you." Then looking straight into her eyes, he asked, "Will you marry me?" Ellie laughed, but tears of happiness streamed down her cheeks. She didn't need to think. "Yes." Seb slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply as snowflakes danced around them. Months later at Glenmore Castle, Ellie walked down the aisle in a white lace gown, flowers lining the stone pathway. At the end of it stood Sebastian Whitmore, dressed in a crisp black suit, his stormy blue eyes filled with nothing but love. When the priest asked, Seb didn't hesitate. "I do." Ellie gazed into his eyes, the only place she had ever truly felt at home. "I do." Under the Scottish sky, they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, as cheers and applause erupted around them. But the greatest journey was just beginning. After the wedding, they returned to Scotland, dedicating the rest of their lives to running their free medical center, helping the people who needed them most. All the pain, loss, and fear of the past faded away. There were no more storms to run from, only love, peace, and a future they would build together. This story reminds us that fighting for justice comes with sacrifice, but truth will always prevail. Sebastian refused to turn a blind eye to corruption, even when it made him a target. Ellie, with her bravery and unwavering heart, stood by him, even when it meant risking her own life. Together they faced the storm, and in the end, they didn't just survive. They created something beautiful from the ashes. Thank you for following this story. Let us know what you thought, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional and powerful stories. Leave a comment. Share this story with others. Stay tuned for the next one. Until next time, love always wins.